Welcome to Afrik Express. Today we are here in Brockton. Our guest is a very special man. He is the first African American to be elected into the Brockton City Council. And his name is none other than Mr. Jass Stewart. Mr. Jass Stewart, you are welcome to Afrik Express.
Good to be here. Congratulations on the show. I watch you and I always enjoy what you guys talk about here.
Thank you. Like I just said, you are the first African American to be elected into City Council in Brockton. Mm-hmm. Has this added pressure to the way you perform your job?
Well, if there is pressure, it's good pressure. I've always felt that my #1 job in life has been to be successful and to excel, and I think merit, meaning being a top performer, has always driven me. So if there is pressure, it's just to be a very good example, understanding that being the first and the only means that people are watching more closely, those who believe in me are watching more closely, and also those who are detractors, who want to see me fail, are watching more closely. So that means I keep my eye on the prize. I'm committed to keeping my promises that I made when I ran, and I've been working very hard to deliver on those promises. But I always say that it's great to make history, but it's more important to make certain that history means something. And that's what I've been working towards since I've been elected.
Most times, at least data shows that usually when the person is usually the first African American, the first woman in something. There's this need or the additional pressure from everybody. All eyes are on you, you know. And now you feel like, okay, I have to. When others work 10 hours, you do 24. You know, you do 24 hours. Right. You know, you don't get that.
Well, you know, first of all, I love the job. And I've been fortunate because all the jobs I've had in my life, I've loved. And which means, for me, my job is my craftsmanship, which also means that I work at it all the time, you know. And part of my love of my artwork is to keep at it and to become better at it, and knowing that it's a endless pursuit. So the pressures of putting in extra hours or following up on additional detail or seeing every individual, you know, every single person as someone that I need to build a personal relationship with when I get calls about potholes or even something bigger. It's something that I enjoy doing. I think it's something that it's important that we do as city councilors. And frankly, I think that's what people entrusted in me to do, is to be highly responsive, to be highly personal, to take the time, and I love doing it. I mean, obviously there's some challenges and struggles in the job, but I understood what I was running for. I asked for it, I wanted it, I have it, and now hopefully I'm doing a good job at it. You know, I do know that I need to do a better job, and so part of the different parts of being a city councilor, there's constituent services. People call you, you want to be responsive and help solve their problems. And for the most part, I think I do that pretty well. There's another part which is around being a good legislator. You know, you want to have good pieces of legislation, ordinances, and things like that to help make the city more effective. And that involves the whole city council and getting my colleagues to buy into what I'm trying to put forward. And I know I can do a better job of that. I've been, good at it, but not great at it. And my goal is to be great at everything that I do.
Well, that brings me to, I happen to know that you've been doing a lot of work in the city of Brockton. Could you tell the viewer some of this work that you've been doing?
Yeah, well, it's the way it's structured is really odd because we have a part-time city councilor system and we have very little to no administrative support. So all the calls that we take the outreach, the advocacy, doing the calendar, writing the letters, we all do ourselves. And it's a part-time job, technically. So what I did actually was took some time to focus on this job because it was so overwhelming for me, and I felt like things weren't moving fast enough. So I've been pretty much at it full-time for several months. I can't continue to do that because I got to feed the children, but it was important for me to get my head and hands around the work. So overall, I think I just recently did my first year in office kind of report, and I forget the exact numbers, but I think I went to 524 events last year.
Yes.
Public events and then private meetings. I believe I responded to like 360 phone calls or email messages, and I'm pretty excited about the fact that I think most of that ended up in people getting their questions answered and their problems solved. And frankly, this year, I should be doing more because I should get better at it. And that's sort of my goal.
But you've done other projects too. If you could just tell us some specifics of the projects that you've done.
I mean, some of the things I'm really proud of this year. There's so many, some are simple, but they're big. Like, for example, when I first joined the city council, there was really no formal mechanism for city councilors to get official news about like emergency situations in cities. So let's say there were a shooting. In fact, when I was elected, there were a rash of shootings leading up to the one at Brockton High School, if you may remember. And I would email the police chief or call him and say, haven't been sworn in yet, but I want to get the official information on what's happening. And he said that I was one of the first, in fact, he said I was the first city councilor to ask that question, like what's the formal process of getting information? Because I was very uncomfortable reading information from the newspaper or driving home into the city, and maybe I missed reading the paper online and not knowing what was happening. So I wrote him and the mayor-elect and said, this seems to be a concern for me personally, but also it hinders my ability to do my job well for those who elected me. How can we fix the system? And to the mayor's credit and to the police chief's credit, we did put a whole new process in place. And so now we're sent formal notices of major events that happen in the city so that we're not waiting to read it in the paper, or hear it by chance like everyone else. So it's a small initiative in some respects, but it has a huge outcome in terms of our being more informed. It can get the right information out, and it's timely and things like that. So that's one example. Another one would be, in terms of tax policy, for example, I voted against every single tax increase and fee increase last year because I believe that when families are struggling and businesses are struggling, sometimes government has the tendency to try to recoup costs by taxing people to death. And my belief is when everyone's struggling, the government needs to tighten its belt and sort of work more efficiently and work smarter. And you can't do that if you're constantly raising taxes. So we have to get sort of more efficient about how we do our work. Now I'm not an anti-tax person per se, meaning I don't believe you go back and roll back revenue that we're getting. But we have to be realistic that everyone is being squeezed. And I represent people who are being squeezed, the middle class, and
you're basically saying that it should happen at the right time when it's supposed to, not just for the fact of raising taxes.
Right. And I don't think anyone says they're raising taxes for the heck of it. I mean, I think there's a real financial need. But my point is, if you're struggling as a municipality, you got to be smarter about waste and inefficiencies. And when you have the option of raising taxes, you tend to be less aggressive around finding those areas where you can trim waste. And then not being able to raise taxes forces you to do that. And I think there's some places where we can certainly look at, there may be I hate to use the word excessive because it's not that much, but there are places where we can trim our spending, how we do things.
You have worked in other projects that are not particularly that. In fact, some people say you work too hard. And
I'm too ambitious.
too ambitious.
Yeah.
And some say you're trying to change everything around.
Uh-huh.
I am going to come back to this because we're going to take a short break. And after the short break, we'll come back and talk about this in detail.